And still with that story, fresh reporting that Iran considered targeting a Ukrainian port in the Black Sea with ballistic missiles after that Ukrainian strike on that Iranian ship. The New York Times outlining how after a flurry of diplomacy, the Iranians opted not to respond. So for more, we welcome Pyotr Kurzin, a former UN official and geopolitical expert and host of the Global Gambit YouTube podcast, joining us now from Italy. Thank you so much for your time. So talk about widening the ambit of the various wars. What more is known about this diplomatic move that stopped Tehran from hitting back after that Ukrainian strike on an Iranian ship? What are you learning?
Well, I never thought it was really likely, to be honest with you. If we think about this rationally for a minute, what really serves the purpose of the Iranians to do this? They have a difficult fight with the Americans. One can argue that it's not going well for the Americans more, but opening a second front with the Ukrainians doesn't necessarily benefit the Iranians, the IRGC. It divides their attention. It requires them to manage another security theater, another front. And also, there's no guarantee that the Russians would sort of be backing them up. At the end of the day, the Caspian Sea has been one of the alternative lifelines, if you like, outside of the Strait of Hormuz that have kept the IGC functioning to a certain extent. And so to make that a much more overt theater, I don't think makes much sense. So whilst this was a scare in the first 24 hours, I was always skeptical about how much it would mean the integration of these two wars.
The dangers of the escalations between the US and Iran and between Ukraine and Russia overlapping are a lot to process. And talking about Russia, the Kremlin accusing Ukraine of widening that geographical scope of what it describes as terrorist attacks. It says the Ukrainian attack on that vessel should be considered an assault on Iran itself. But as you are alluding to, not everyone thought that Iran would respond. But what does this potentially mean for the alliance between Russia and Iran specifically?
Well, the two have a strategic partnership. They have a very close military operation understanding. It was the Shahed drones that the Iranians first sent to the Russians that they reverse engineered, have improved, and now been sending back to the Iranians to utilize against American partners and allies across the Middle East. And generally, they've also advised them in Crimea in the earlier stages of the war. But this is the critical element here. As the war has gone on, Ukraine's balance of power and innovation has shifted. The trajectory of the war has changed. The momentum has changed. And whilst I'm not getting ahead of myself of pretending to know who wins, the situation is not easy for Moscow. And so the relationship between these two goes only thus far. It is a marriage of convenience, much like the Chinese are currently looking at who replaces Putin, much like they don't get overly involved in the war with Iran. They provide them potentially over the head, arm, shoulder, rocket kind of capabilities. But this is the limitations of these kinds of arrangements. And so the Russians, yes, they can provide satellite imagery for the Iranians to strike American targets. But are they actually going to send troops, more military funding, equipment? They can't. They need it in Ukraine. So both of these two are limited by the realities of their situation, which is fighting two very different but intense wars, which ultimately means it's self-interest. It's their own survival, fight for survival, and that's the also relationship and nature of autocratic entities.
It'll also be interesting to see what kind of support the US might offer Ukraine. We saw those images of those meetings at the White House. We wait to see how it all unfolds. For now, we need to leave it there. Live from Italy, Pyotr Kurzin, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.